Story 1.
The wind howled all night, making both Jack and Miguel shiver involuntarily. Neither of them could sleep. They tossed and turned in their beds, causing a constant creaking sound from their room. 4 days ago, they had left the hospitable walls of the mental asylum. Naturally, Fernando had helped them, providing money upon their departure. He advised them where to buy weapons and necessary equipment cheaply. After they disappeared from view, Fernando stood for a long time, muttering prayers. His own problems now seemed trivial. At that moment, he firmly decided to start a new life and use his money to build a rehabilitation center for those wishing to overcome drug addiction. Towards morning, the former mental patients fell into a heavy sleep. Both slept dreamlessly. Around 9:30, the heat and a non-functioning air conditioner forced them out of bed. They stepped outside with headaches and bad premonitions. However, in the sunlight, the town with the peculiar name of Refuge appeared much more attractive than it did the previous night. Laughter of children and smiling faces surrounded them, and the overall atmosphere of idleness created the illusion that no one ever worked in this lovely town. They went to a bar for a bite to eat. Miguel got a haircut and tidied himself up, but his aged eyes still looked starkly out of place on the face of a middle-aged man. A young, pretty, but sloppily dressed waitress approached almost immediately to take their order. Her manners matched her appearance. She stared intently at Miguel as if trying to remember where she had seen him before. When she left, Miguel asked, "Honestly, do I look that bad?" Jack looked thoughtfully at his new companion for a few seconds, then shook his head and said, "You know, right now you look like a bum who just won the lottery." Miguel smiled bitterly. "That's pretty much the case," he said, pulling out dark glasses from his pocket and putting them on. "That's better," Jack said. The chicken and sides were expertly prepared, and the young men eagerly devoured 2 portions each. Refuge was the last populated place on their journey, so they decided to spend the entire day exploring the town. Tomorrow at dawn, they would continue their journey to the land of spirits and ghosts. The town had nothing remarkable, but it was pleasant to wander the streets among the living, and most importantly, normal people. No one here was acting strangely or crying without reason. No one was throwing tantrums. There was no hospital smell, just a steady scent of dust and spices. Passing by a sports ground, Miguel suddenly froze, mesmerized by the kids kicking around an old, battered ball. The boys played terribly. Among them I'd be a champion, Miguel thought, recalling his distant childhood. Despite their poor skills, the kids played with great enthusiasm, compensating somewhat for their lack of talent. Jack also stopped, trying to understand what had caught his companion's attention. Suddenly, Miguel seemed to wake up. He approached the playing kids, called them over, and squatted down to negotiate. Jack couldn't hear what he was saying, but Miguel occasionally pointed to the ball while the kids shook their heads in denial. Finally, they all nodded in agreement. Miguel handed them 20 pesos, their last money, and took full possession of the old ball. "What did you do that for? What will we eat all day? And why do you need that ragged ball?" "I don't know yet. A long time ago, I took 20 pesos to distract the police guarding my family. I don't know what issues they had, but because of me, gangsters killed all my relatives. And guess who paid me the money? I have no idea. It was Papa Dupre. He called me over when I was playing football. If only you knew how well I played." Miguel looked dreamily into the distance, smiled, and said, "I could beat all these kids easily. Now I'm not even sure I could hit the ball. Forgive me, but I suddenly wanted to buy this ball. I was somehow certain I should pay 20 pesos for it, but now I don't know why." "Maybe it will come in handy," Jack said, patting Miguel on the shoulder. Until this moment, he had regarded him with slight disdain. Just think, he had pulled a monster out of hell for revenge, then ran away in fear, turning into a last-rank vagrant. Probably drank himself to the point of seeing little devils. You know, I'm deeply grateful to fate for bringing us together. I would never have dared to take such a step on my own. I lived alongside the monster for a long time. I know what it is. In any case, I know more about it than others. All it needs is human blood and suffering. At night, it is almost invincible. Maybe it has a weak spot, but I don't know of one. Jack patted Miguel on the shoulder again and said, Maybe this creature is immortal. But from my experience, no one can withstand a piece of lead in a steel casing. Besides, we have 2 magazines of silver bullets. Jack laughed. I remember the priest's eyes when you asked him to bless the bullets. It seems unnecessary to me. Not at all. I assure you, a regular bullet won't take him down. I've seen him get hit with at least a dozen bullets without any visible effect. Jack hesitated for a few seconds, then said confidently, I still think we'll manage, and if we die, at least it won't be in vain. While Jack set up the explosive charge, Miguel peered into the night jungle, listening to every rustle. Everything was relatively calm, aside from the usual sounds of the night. When Jack finished, he asked, Hey, how fast can this monster move? Like a bird, came the reply. Jack whistled. So it can fly too? When it wants, it can turn into a giant bat. It's like a black flash. Poof. Miguel made a gesture mimicking an explosion. And it's flying. And can it track us in the forest at night? Miguel looked down, sighed heavily, and said, I don't know about you, but it could find me without much trouble. Do you know how it does that? Before casting the spell, I deeply cut my palm and soaked the altar with my blood. Miguel kicked the hated stone with anger, sighed heavily again, and continued. It seems to have a telepathic link with me. Sometimes it would say, I feel your heartbeat, my blood brother. Wait, Jack said excitedly. Maybe the link is mutual. Can you feel its heartbeat? You're kidding? Vampires don't have beating hearts. Its existence is a mockery of all natural laws. Although, honestly, I never tried to sense it. Try now. Why? We already know it's in Papa Dupre's house. Right. Try to locate it when we get closer to its lair. Now let's move. We'll blow this up near dawn so the monster doesn't catch us at night. Are you sure about the remote detonator? Jack twirled the small plastic box packed with electronics and said, You offend me. This is American quality. See, it says, Made in America. We'll see. If it doesn't work, you'll have to run back. That won't happen. There were 4 hours left until dawn. The vampire hunters were exhausted, even Jack. Despite his past good physical condition, he too was out of breath and sweating. He wondered how Miguel managed to keep up the pace, given his seemingly unhealthy lifestyle. But now it didn't matter. Rest, Jack croaked, collapsing onto the damp ground. Miguel fell beside him. 2 hours of sleep, then we make a big bang and rush to our goal. I'd rather rush to a date with a girl than into a vampire's lair, Miguel replied, closing his eyes and hoping to fall asleep immediately. He succeeded, and he went off to a wonderful land of dreams where he met old friends. There was no fear, no killers or monsters, only joy and happiness. Miguel nearly howled when he heard, Get up. What time is it? Miguel asked in a sleepy voice. It's time, came the stern reply. Jack took out the detonator and pressed the button. Miguel squinted his eyes, thinking, Will it not explode? But after a few seconds, a distant rumble was heard, and a flash appeared in the west. The charge they had set was so powerful that it likely turned the entire Temple of the Damned into ruins. The altar, they hoped, was reduced to dust. The monster had lost its eternal home and safe haven. The vampire would be furious and ready to meet uninvited guests, but they had to risk it. Their journey was extremely difficult. They constantly had to push through thick undergrowth, but they moved almost without rest, despite the heat and terrible humidity. Jack navigated by map and compass, and Miguel by his memories. Closer to evening, Jack sighed heavily and asked, "Well, can you feel it yet?" Miguel shook his head and said, panting, "No, but I have an uneasy feeling, like we're being watched." "Keep an eye out. I hope we finish before dark." They walked a bit further, gripping their weapons tightly. Suddenly, Jack yelled, "Stop!" At that moment, a spear whizzed past where Jack was about to step. They quickly darted to the side. The air filled with the sound of flying spears and arrows. Then from the undergrowth emerged half-naked Indians, painted like demons from hell. Shouting from the undergrowth emerged half-naked Indians, painted like demons from hell, shouting fiercely. Miguel, unable to aim well with his rifle, switched to his revolver. The Indians continued their advance with a crazed fervor, but eventually retreated after assessing the power of the firearms. Both Miguel and Jack sprinted forward in short bursts. While running, Jack said, "You know, last time I was here, I didn't see a single living soul. Now it seems overpopulated." Miguel spat out blood. A branch had cut his lip. The scratch was minor but bled profusely. He said in a weary voice, "I think the monster has recruited an entire army in the meantime." Then he paused for a moment, looked around and almost shouted, "I can feel it. I swear I can feel it, and it feels me too. It's waking up. We need to hurry. It's that way." He pointed slightly off the current path. But progress was slow, as the Indians, having learned from their failed attack, stalked them and set up ambushes. Only Jack's combat experience helped them avoid most of these traps. However, Jack had sustained a serious leg injury. A short arrow had pierced through. They prayed the Indians hadn't used poison. There was no time to stop for bandaging, as the sun was rapidly setting. With a swift motion, Miguel pushed aside a long, leaf-covered branch, revealing Papa Dupre's abandoned villa ahead. He almost shouted in joy, but then stopped short when a huge man, with such grotesque war paint that Miguel doubted his humanity, appeared. Despite his fear, Miguel fired immediately, then again. The painted man managed to strike Miguel's shoulder with a club lined with sharp spikes before collapsing. The pain was excruciating, and Miguel fell to the ground, darkness overtaking him. He came to as Jack clumsily tried to get him on his feet. "Where are they?" was his first question. "They disappeared. It's like they vanished into thin air," Jack replied. Miguel managed to stand, though his head still spun and his arm was numb. With immense effort, he clenched his fist, bending his arm at the elbow, and nearly howled in pain, but stayed conscious. He said, "The monster is waking up. We're a bit late. Now it wants to feast on us, and its minions won't dare interfere." "Well, then we'll have to face it head on," Jack said, loading silver bullets into his rifles. He then bandaged Miguel as best as he could. There was no longer any rush. Afterward, Miguel helped him with his leg, and the hunters moved slowly toward their fate. In just over a year, the jungle had almost completely engulfed Papa Dupre's villa. In the last rays of the setting sun, it looked as ominous as an ancient crypt. As they got closer, they saw the gruesome decorations put up by the villa's current owner, human skulls impaled on wooden stakes. "It's waiting for us," Miguel said. Carefully stepping around scattered bones, They made their way to the front entrance. The iron gates were off their hinges, the thick bars bent and rusted. Miguel remembered the beautiful flower beds and the artificial pond with colorful carp. He felt no pity for Papa Dupre, who had deserved his horrible death, but he lamented the beauty destroyed by the monster. Old bullet casings lay here and there, evidence of a futile resistance. As they approached the grand marble staircase, Miguel noticed the perfect order there, likely where the monster performed its vile rituals. Cautiously climbing the steps, they saw numerous dark stains, undoubtedly blood. The danger grew more palpable with each step. The massive walnut doors were wide open, inviting them into the tangible darkness beyond. "Do you feel it?" Jack asked. Miguel answered after a moment, his voice trembling slightly, whether from the pain in his shoulder or from fear. "It feels like it's everywhere." Jack didn't dwell on Miguel's words. His military training taught him to act. He helped Miguel put on a helmet with a built-in flashlight and did the same himself. Then, taking small steps, they moved forward, gripping their rifles tightly. 2 beams of light cut through the darkness, revealing overturned furniture and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. Entering, Jack noticed the thick curtains covering all the windows, but now they were unnecessary. Their only ally, the sun, had set. "Honestly, I didn't expect gratitude from you, but I never thought you'd do something like this," came a raspy voice from behind them. Both men jumped, then quickly turned, pointing their weapons toward the voice. The vampire sat on the marble railing, smiling its predatory smile. "And who is this with you? Don't tell me there are still fools in the world. Miguel, answer me one question. Why? Why are you here?" "To stop evil." The monster laughed wildly. "Not long ago you considered Papa Dupre the greatest evil. You were willing to sell your soul for revenge. You did the right thing. I was gravely mistaken. Come on. Are you sure you're not mistaken now? Why do you think I'm evil? Just because I don't like sunlight? That only means I'm not at risk for skin cancer." The monster's piercing gaze seemed to penetrate their minds, sowing doubt about their chosen path. The vampire jumped off the railing and began pacing back and forth along the edge of the top step. The young men stepped back in horror. "Forgive me for not inviting you inside. I haven't cleaned up in there. And admit it, it's nice to stroll under my cold moonlight," the vampire said, pointing to the full moon in the sky. Then he spread his arms wide and said in an almost fatherly tone, "Besides, my followers want to see our interaction." Only now did the partners notice the house surrounded by a tight circle of Indians in war paint. There were a lot of them, about 200. They kept a respectful distance, and 2 men in feathers stood slightly ahead, likely priests. The monster continued. "With such an entourage, I don't need to hunt. I get my food delivered. Sometimes I go out briefly for fun. By the way, when you blew up the temple, my people were furious and wanted to torture you. But when I realized it was you, old friend Miguel, with your companion, you still haven't introduced us, I stopped my warriors. Unfortunately, a bit late, as I see you lost a few drops of precious blood, but nothing that can't be fixed." The vampire paused, stepping forward. Jack and Miguel took another step back. They didn't want to enter the house. It was even scarier inside. But allowing the monster to get close was also highly undesirable. It seemed the terrifying gaze of its red eyes almost completely paralyzed their will. They couldn't tear their eyes away, couldn't argue with the vampire, let alone pull the trigger. The gaze was both alluring and terrifying. Every cell in their bodies trembled. A wild ecstasy filled their souls. It was like trying a drug for the first time, both scary and pleasant. The vampire beckoned them closer. "But I'm not mad at you. You're still kids, and kids like to play with fireworks, sometimes hurting themselves. I'm sure you'll never do anything like this again. Right?" Both Miguel and Jack nodded without realizing it. "Good boys. Now come to me, my children. You'll have a worthy place in my army. I might even make you immortal. What's there to divide? We're almost brothers, Miguel. Come to me." The monster extended its arms for an embrace. Jack suddenly tasted blood in his mouth, horrified at the thought of becoming a ghoul. He remembered the monster savoring every drop of blood from one of Papa Dupre's guards, hung from the ceiling. The memory almost made him vomit. Jack pulled the trigger. At that moment, Miguel began shooting too. The duo of rifles should have torn the vampire to pieces. The monster vanished in a blink. Reloading their weapons, the partners took small steps towards the stairs, carefully watching the Indians who stood still, slightly shuffling. Or maybe it was an illusion in the unclear moonlight. "I felt like I was about to dance to his tune," Miguel admitted. But Jack was more concerned with something else. Had they managed to kill the vampire? Judging by the warrior's behavior, no. They reached the edge of the staircase and looked down. Two beams of light revealed a figure standing in the shadow of a partially ruined column. The ghoul looked at them, winked with a red eye, and said, "Silver bullets were a good idea, but you confused me with a werewolf." "Never mind," Jack muttered, carefully aiming for the head. He opened fire, but the monster easily dodged the headshots. Other bullets hitting different parts of its body caused minimal damage, just temporary inconveniences like mosquito bites. Grimacing in pain, Miguel set his rifle on the marble railing, got on his knees, and also started aiming for the vampire's head. The monster found it much harder to avoid the shots. "2 against 1 isn't fair," the vampire said, and suddenly disappeared. "But I have to admit, you're quite clever." The words came from behind them. The ghoul stood in the doorway, smiling arrogantly. Another short burst from the rifles pushed it back into the house. That was the last of their silver bullets. Jack reloaded his M16 with regular rounds. Miguel discarded his rifle and pulled out his revolver, his left arm burning with pain. The vampire didn't take long to reappear. It walked slowly, shuffling slightly, still smiling its dreadful smile. When it appeared in the doorway, it said, "Guys, we've had fun. I assure you, you're the best. First, your idea with silver bullets was genuinely good, and aiming for the head wasn't bad either. The head is my weakest spot. I've accumulated so much information over the centuries." The monster smiled again. "Now let's stop playing war. I hope this ends now." The ghoul began to approach slowly. This time, the guys didn't retreat. There was nowhere to go. Retreating down the stairs was dangerous. They could break their necks. Although in their current situation, it might be the best option. The vampire glanced at the weapons they held and said in a displeased tone, "Seriously, this is getting ridiculous. Your bullets can't harm me, even if you bless them in a country church." Miguel heard metal clink on marble. He glanced down and was stunned. Did Jack give up? He thought in horror. Miguel knew he couldn't handle the vampire alone. He tried to support his partner with a shout, but Jack pulled a bottle from his backpack and yelled, "What about holy water?" throwing it at the ghoul. The monster recoiled with a scream, but the bottle hit its head and shattered. The screams turned to shrieks as smoke or steam rose. Miguel remembered his holy water in his backpack. But unbuckling the straps was beyond his strength. He pulled a knife from his belt and cut them. The pack fell to the floor and rolled down the stairs. Miguel followed it. Meanwhile, the monster crumbled to ashes, which scattered on the marble tiles. The remains then transformed, and within moments, the vampire turned into a black panther, which roared and lunged at Jack. A long burst made the panther jump aside. The monster howled, its face marked by burns. The ghoul quickly transformed back into a humanoid creature with glowing red eyes. The severe burn crossed its entire head. Enraged, it wanted to finish the job. A simple death wouldn't suffice. They must suffer long and painfully. Taking control of itself, suppressing the pain, it spoke in a more or less calm tone. "You never cease to amaze me. That hurt, but it wasn't lethal. I've known many aspects of pain in my long life, so..." The monster noticed it didn't evoke the same fear as before. These primitive beings saw it was vulnerable. Should it end the charade and tear off this upright creature's head with one hand, then drink its fill of blood? No, that was too little. "You can't defeat me. I'm not bragging, but I'm immortal." A short burst hit the vampire's chest, making it annoyed. It moved forward slowly, no longer smiling. 2 bullets struck its head, passing through. The vampire froze for a moment, then continued moving, burning its opponent with a glare. But Jack skillfully avoided the fiery red eyes and lamented not having explosive bullets. "You're worsening your situation," the vampire growled, and another long burst knocked it down. Jack reloaded his rifle, realizing he was out of ammo. He reached into his backpack. The monster rose, now resembling a giant wolf with an elongated snout and a huge, disproportionate mouth. The wolf charged at the man. No more games. At the last moment, Jack pulled a large wooden cross from his pack and held it out. The wolf stopped and recoiled, then stood on 2 legs, pacing side to side with hands behind its back. Now it was a man with a wolf's muzzle. "The cross is just 2 pieces of wood. Do you think you can scare me with it?" "I was born long before Christ," the vampire said, but didn't approach. Besides, Protestants don't recognize the cross, seeing it as a symbol of the Savior's torment. The ghoul tried to meet Jack's eyes, but he skillfully avoided its gaze. Suddenly, the vampire lunged forward. Jack gripped the cross tighter, but found himself lost in 2 bottomless pits of red fury. He couldn't look away. The monster burned his mind and soul. Jack's mission to kill the immortal seemed absurd. This creature had lived countless lifetimes by human standards. And why kill it? It lived in the jungle, occasionally causing disappearances in nearby towns. It didn't seek to conquer the world. If it wanted, it could succeed. Its memory held the experience of countless generations, making all earthly computers primitive abacuses in comparison. And he offered us immortality, Jack thought. Imagine perfecting my skills to shoot a fly mid-flight without aiming. I'd be unmatched in hand-to-hand combat. How would it feel to be a wolf? Must be indescribable. The vampire moved closer without moving its feet, just like a chess piece sliding. It grabbed the cross and broke it with one hand. "Man, you're weak-kneed," the vampire growled, lifting Jack off the ground by his face with one hand, then throwing him toward the door. As Jack flew, he wondered how his neck withstood the inhuman force. He hit the wall and fell. He hoped to lose consciousness, but the blackness didn't come. Agonizing pain shot through his body. The vampire approached slowly, grinning. Jack had no more defenses. The ghoul no longer needed to hypnotize him. He wanted Jack to feel terror completely. When only 3 steps away, Miguel staggered onto the marble platform. He held his good hand behind his back, while the injured one hung limp. Gathering his last strength, he moved as fast as he could, but couldn't catch up with the monster. Finally he shouted, "Hey brother, wait!" The vampire stopped, confused. In the struggle with Jack, he had forgotten about Miguel. Something made him not want to turn around. His rotten core sensed trouble, but he also felt dawn approaching. He had spent too long dealing with these troublesome intruders. Time to finish this. "What do you want? Join your friend? Or do you choose the stronger one?" the monster said, turning. At that moment, Miguel revealed what he held. The sight made the vampire laugh. He hadn't felt such joy in years. The man held an old leather ball, seemingly hoping to strike him with it. Him, the one who had crushed armies, destroyed nations, challenged gods. The vampire's laughter didn't deter Miguel. He took a few more steps. When the monster saw the determination in his eyes, dreadful doubts made its red eyes dart. "Return my soul!" Miguel shouted and threw the ball at the vampire's chest. The monster's eyes filled with terror. The ball flew into its chest and disappeared. The monster screamed with such force that leaves fell from nearby trees. In an instant it burst into bright flames. Terrified Indians scattered in all directions. Within moments the vampire turned to ashes on the marble. Then the ball fell onto the ash pile, bouncing and creating clouds of dust. "It's over," Miguel said cheerfully, running to the ball and bouncing it on his foot. He felt no pain or fatigue. He had finally triumphed, cleansing himself from corruption. Jack stood, rotated his neck, and watched Miguel's graceful moves with interest. Miguel wasn't just bouncing the ball with his foot. He used his knee, chest, and head. The ball never touched the ground, constantly rising and falling. It seemed Miguel could keep this up forever. "You took your time," Jack said grumpily. "I gave you a chance to shine, gringo. You Yankees always want to lead and teach everyone," Miguel replied, smiling. He was overjoyed, his happiness contagious to the exhausted Jack. He had never appreciated European football. How could it compare to American football? But now he saw its beauty and wanted to kick the round ball himself. He was shy to tell Miguel, plus his injured leg still hurt terribly. Far in the east, the first light of dawn appeared. It was bright enough to see the awe-struck and frightened Indians emerging from the jungle. They walked on bent legs, bowing respectfully. "Hey," Miguel said, "let's rebuild Dupre's mansion and declare ourselves emperors. Look at all our subjects." He nodded towards the approaching Indians. Then he stopped abruptly. The ball fell to the ground. "Let's start a football club. Look at all the potential players. Maybe Mr. Monkey will fund it. His enemies wouldn't dare come here." Jack chuckled initially. Then, seeing the Indians encircling the ball like a sacred object, he reconsidered the idea's absurdity. He muttered, "What about a bright green uniform? Light top, dark bottom. We need a good name." "Maybe Amazonia," Miguel suggested. "No, that doesn't fit." "Why not?" "Because you're rushing. You need to think about it. This isn't like killing vampires. Of course, you Yankees know your business." The partners, arm in arm, walked towards their subjects, who surrounded the ball, examining it, but afraid to touch. Miguel smiled and said, "You know, I sometimes think if ancient Rome had football, they would have forgotten about gladiator fights forever. It's much more interesting." Miguel smiled, watching the closing group of Indians, and kicked the ball up again, savoring the lightness and freedom of movement. Jack couldn't hide his smile either, even though his leg still ached. The vampire hunters, now heroes in the eyes of the locals, felt on top of the world. They had rid the land of an ancient evil, and for the first time in a long while, they felt a sense of peace. "Let's rebuild the mansion and start that football club," Miguel said, his voice filled with renewed energy and excitement. "We can teach these kids how to play properly." Jack chuckled, looking at the hopeful faces of the Indians. "Yeah, maybe we can. It's about time we did something constructive for a change." As the first rays of the sun fully broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the scene, Miguel and Jack knew their journey was far from over. But for now, they would embrace this moment of triumph and look forward to a new beginning. Miguel picked up the ball, holding it high above his head as a symbol of their victory. The Indians cheered, seeing the ball not just as a toy, but as a beacon of hope and unity. Jack looked at Miguel and nodded. "We did it. Against all odds, we actually did it." Miguel nodded back, his eyes shining with determination. "This is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead, but I'm ready."
Story 2.
Breaking a person is easy, in the literal sense of breaking. Just simultaneously strike the chest and abdomen with the edges of two hard paws, like branches entwined with stiff ropes, so that the cracking ribs and shards of the breastbone pierce the internal organs. That's it. The person is still alive for a while because, if lucky, the heart remains untouched. But the components of their body die, and they die with them, slowly and painfully. Worse, while they die, they are being eaten. Returning home from the night shift through a bleak neighborhood, I habitually thought about anything but the possibility of meeting killers. I was a well-worn detail of this area, just like the narrow streets between high-rise tenements, where you walk not on asphalt but on a soft, though rough, carpet of garbage, cautiously so as not to stumble. Just like the windows of the first and second floors, boarded up with plywood and bars. The glances of the local tough guys slide indifferently off me, not lingering. Who's interested in the shapeless figure, either of a woman or an old hag, trudging wearily at dawn, so early that it's still dark and cold, to the same hole they crawled out of? Baggy clothes. The extinguished gaze of a person who has long been living on inertia. What were the parents thinking, living in a hopelessly impoverished area, naming their child the romantic Jilly, Night Violet? In a certain sense, one of their own, especially since everyone knows I work as a dishwasher, which means there's nothing much to take from me. But these ones found something to take. They dragged me into a narrow gap among the garbage containers just as I seemed to have passed them. A blow that knocked the wind out of me threw me onto the foul pile of trash that didn't fit on top. Or maybe it hadn't been taken out for a long time. They threw me so hard that my head hit the wall of the building, and I lost consciousness. That was the last thing that was a blessing for me. Because when I came to, I found out my mouth was tightly sealed by a hairy hand, more like a paw. Probably so I wouldn't scream. But I couldn't scream anymore anyway. It seems the one holding my mouth soon realized this and joined the one who was tearing at my clothes, along with my skin and insides. And then both of them started tearing into my flesh. I was choking on the blood spilling from my mouth as my body was roughly held to keep it from slipping, and the two cannibals growled softly and ripped chunks of meat from me. I didn't see them. I only saw the distant sky, a narrow strip trembling, lit by the dim lights of the city where I had always been lonely, useless, and was dying the same way. Lonely, only good for starving cannibals. I thought of nothing. Only burned in the fire of consuming pain, growling and snarling, the cannibals retreated. It seemed someone or something scared them off. One of them yanked my leg as a parting gift. It felt like he tore a strip of skin. I only felt my body shudder. The blood was no longer trickling from my mouth. Consciousness became clearer by the second, and soon I realized two truths. I couldn't move, or it would be like getting shocked until my eyes went dark. There was no point in calling for help. My torn body was bled dry. It was only a matter of seconds. Death. And calling. When you can't even move your lips or tense your throat. Nothing from the past flashed before my eyes, and memory didn't respond with familiar or close images. Everything was overshadowed by the tearing pain that gradually dulled. It seemed like a transition to another lifeless state was beginning. Like falling asleep, if not for pain. Pain, pain, pain. Someone inside me screams, cries. The strip of sky above, visible through my eyelashes, suddenly shrank, and in a panic, trying not to shudder, already in drifting semi-consciousness, I could only think, God, don't let them come back. Please. God. With pain, I pried open my eyelashes, stuck together by drying blood. He was sitting on the edge of the container, squatting, leaning over me. A flexible black figure. It seemed to me I even heard him sniffing at me. And I tensed. He's going to finish me off. I wasn't afraid of that, but of new pain. But he bent even lower, miraculously balancing on the edge of the container, and whispered almost into my lips, "Do you want to live?" That question awakened something close to rage within me. Is he laughing? A cold breath on my blood-caked, freezing lips. So you do. You are strong. He jumped softly, but disturbing the foul piles of garbage also disturbed my torn body, to the blinding pain. Regaining consciousness, I discovered. He was standing over me, feet on either side of my dying body, leaning low towards me as if examining. What did he see here in the pitch dark? Cold fingers lifted my chin, causing pain as if slicing my scalp. I was too tired to look. Closed my eyes. Would love to fall asleep. Forever. And didn't even flinch when cool lips touched my neck. A prick. Compared to the bites that tore me to shreds, this prick seemed merciful. I still felt. Something heavy leaned against my neck, seemingly slightly pulling the skin. Then whispered into my ear, "Don't go out during the day. Only at night." Mocking me. As if I could even move from this spot. Then everything vanished. Just vanished, that's all. No strange shadow over me. No one moving. Just the strip of sky starting to lighten, or rather still darkening. And the smell that started to intensify. The smell of excrement, which I hadn't noticed before. Sharp, penetrating, turning my insides, which were torn so much that no skilled surgeon could stitch them up. Unexpectedly, I arched from a strange paroxysm that made my whole body shudder. The wounds, which I had felt as just a single skinned surface until now, suddenly multiplied and roared, and I screamed shrilly along with them. Screamed and didn't believe it, screaming with my torn throat. The rest is hazy. I remember standing between the container and the wall of the building, clutching some heavy object in my hands, long and dragging on the asphalt. No, not on the asphalt. I was stupidly dragging this object from the pile of garbage, and it kept slipping out of my weak but stubborn hands. Then I remember putting on a heavy coat, slouching and walking mechanically down a familiar road. However, this road looked strange, ghostly, dimly lit by neon. My body itched dully, and the coat felt prickly and sticky. I got home to a tiny one-room apartment, collapsed on the couch as I was, in the coat. And my last thought was, I have strange dreams. I got up like a somnambulist, glanced around meaninglessly, and in the dimly lit room lowered the curtain tied long ago. Then didn't bother to throw an old flannel blanket, left over from childhood, over the curtain. Why? Was I scared of something seen in a dream? I don't know. A violent shiver from the cold under the coat woke me up. Sitting on the bed, I shivered and looked around the room. Didn't understand anything. Why is it dark? But I like it. I should take off this prickly coat. That turned out to be no easy task. What happened next reminded me of childhood when clothes, if not noticed in time, stuck to bleeding scratches or festering wounds. Carefully, I tried to peel the torn lining off myself without causing pain, even the smallest, and suddenly realized the coat had stuck not to wounds, but to skin with drying blood. I gathered my courage and sharply pulled the lining off my knee, bracing for pain. No pain. Rather, there was a slight one, like pulling off an old bandage along with stuck hairs. But I didn't experiment further. Went to the small bathroom and just stood under the shower. Soon the heavy coat slid off me, taking most of the blood staining me with it. In my bathroom, the mirror is narrow, hard to see yourself entirely. I took off the remnants of clothes, which would never be needed again since they were torn to rags, and stared dumbly at what I saw in the mirror. I was, in fact, rather plump, with 10 or 12 extra kilos for sure. Used to be. As my mom used to say, only the poor are fat, on potatoes, pasta, and various flour products. Damn. The mirror reflected a skinny, anorexic girl with a hungry look. Not a single wound. Still staring at the mirror, I touched my hips and stomach. Never thought my fingers were so sensitive. They immediately determined that the skin where the flesh had been torn was as thin as single-use bag films. But I'm alive, just as promised. I stood under the shower again and washed off the remaining dirt and blood with my hands. After thoroughly squeezing my hair and wrapping myself in an old towel, I came out and, glancing at the curtained window, climbed onto the bed with my legs. Hugging these very legs, thin as sticks and not full, with protruding veins from standing work like recently, was it only this morning? I tried to reason. The one I had become had a crazy metabolism. That's why in a few hours my wounds, even the most terrible ones, healed. It helped that in that same recent past I was plump. But how soon will the retribution for acquiring such a metabolism come? How soon will I want to? I imagined needing to find a person and bite into their neck, just because I wanted to live, even in such a form. Damn. Timely thought. My stomach immediately growled, and my stomach nervously tightened. Good thing I sometimes think illogically. Well, kind of. My thoughts jump from one subject to another. I looked at my sorry legs again. Curiously, what will I wear now? My size has decreased drastically. That's when I remembered and felt the greatest gratitude to my mom, who never threw away things, even those left from my childhood. From the built-in mezzanine above the entrance door, I took out 2 suitcases, and half an hour later was looking at myself in the mirror again. There's only one big one in the wardrobe door. God, what a horror. Short jeans, a sweater hanging like on a hanger, and I'm hungry. At one glance at this scarecrow, I bent down, rolled up the jeans just below the knee. Now it's okay. I started to look more like those girls who hang out with the cool guys in our neighborhood. And my face now looks okay too, like those girls. I took my father's belt, wanted to buckle it, but just laid it against my back, flattening the sweater when I heard a quiet knock on the door. The entrance one. Strange. Neighbors usually don't come to me in the evening. They sit at home, afraid to even go out to the stairwell. And I don't have a peephole. Sneaking to the door, I cautiously pressed my ear to it. Quiet. The old Jilly would have gone to the room, to sit and be afraid. But I, already a true child of my city, headed to the kitchen. There you can find something to defend yourself with, if necessary. Just as cautiously, I stepped back a few steps. Only the threshold to the kitchen remained to be crossed. The door slammed shortly, but so hard that I jumped. No, I knew my locks were flimsy. But this... 2 burly, some kind of bullish guys stood on the threshold. However, they didn't stand for long. They quickly flew into the hallway, slammed the door behind them. One jumped at me, grabbing my elbows and covering my mouth. "Again?" Out of fear and despair, I bit into his palm. The second, baring his teeth, suddenly began to rock his torso back and forth strangely, as if about to sneeze. But with each swing, his head quickly and horribly transformed. He threw off his jacket, and I stared in shock at his bare chest, rapidly expanding and covered with coarse fur. Couldn't watch further. The first, howling in pain from my bite, threw me against the wall near the kitchen. For a moment in flight I thought it was the end. But the arms extended forward, strangely enough, softened the terrible blow, almost smearing me against the wall. Another second, and I found myself under the ceiling, from where I unexpectedly hissed at the intruders in my home. I managed to notice that they both were transforming into some kind of beasts, huge, monstrously muscular, now frozen from my unexpected hissing from such an unexpected place. And I inhaled to take in more air and hiss again, scaring them, and a stream of sweet, rich aroma gushed into my nostrils, overturning all my insides. This smell, I immediately saw it coming from the bitten hand of the first one. Just didn't quite understand why I didn't sense it right away after biting. Maybe from the fright. They didn't have time to move as I leaped from the wall and darted towards the bitten one. Slim, light as the wind in the night, and as tenacious as a tick, in the sense that I jumped on the first one's back, onto his shoulders. They could have pounced on me and torn me to shreds, but all I wanted was to eat. I wanted so much. And I struck with my finger with suddenly sprouted claws on his neck from the side, and sliding down his trembling back, bit into the torn vein. He quickly oriented and immediately slammed his back against the wall, but I wasn't on his back anymore. Pushing off the floor, I soared onto his shoulders again. My stained mouth no longer bothered me. I quelled the hunger pang. Nor did the moral anguish. I was drinking the blood of non-humans. Even so, non-humans. The second one jumped up and threw his arm, no, a paw, to rip me off the first one's shoulders. Got too close. I struck with my claws, which now sprung out as soon as I thought about hitting. Hit his eyes. A strike, instantaneous as lightning. He recoiled, covering his face. The first one slammed his back against the wall again. Too late. I leaped from his shoulders to the second one's shoulders, who was howling loudly, rubbing his bleeding eyes. The first one rushed at him, waving his paws. I glimpsed how quickly the skin I had torn on his neck regenerated. I didn't know if these monsters had feasted on my body last night, dragging it into the dark place. But did it matter? They could have been. So why would I hesitate when I can satisfy two thirsts at once? Blood and revenge, killing those who made me go through the pain inferno. The human in me receded into the background. I too turned into a beast, swift, mad from the smell of blood and the desire to kill. And this beast in me tore down all constraints. The second didn't bother me. The eyes are a sensitive and complex organ. They will take a long time to regenerate. So without hesitation, I tried again. Jumping from the shoulders of the first one, like a phantom leaf of burnt paper, I darted to the second and struck at his eyes. Something burned me painfully, hit my legs and skin with fire. Reminder, I am without shoes, with rolled-up pants. What is it? Struggling to regain some understanding, close to consciousness and still intuitively, I realized. The air I moved through at insane speed, almost invisible to the werewolves, was burning me. But my two fingers didn't slide over the eyes of the first one, like the second. Flickering over the fanged maw of the werewolf, they rammed into the eye sockets with such force that they hit the bridge of the nose between them. I pulled my fingers out of the wet elastic mess and jumped back from the rising roar and the flailing claws in front of me. Jumped back again. From the second one, whose eyes, though bloody and inflamed, were already regenerating. He clearly still saw dimly, but his ugly nose wings twitched, and he jumped at the scent. Only I wasn't there anymore. He too turned around with incredible speed, but I was already standing nearby, shoved my bloody fingers into my mouth, what their blood did to me. But the main thing, I got information, and strength with it. While the second realized I was right in front of him, I struck at his throat, broke through the stone-like flesh with claws, and yanked the vertebrae towards me. The head flopped back like a poorly sewn head of an old toy. The remaining skin couldn't hold the weight, and the shaggy head thudded to the floor. The falling body I kicked into the first one. The latter, almost still blind, decided that an enemy attacked him and gripped the dead body in iron arms. I found myself behind him and, jumping up, broke his cervical vertebrae with the edge of my hand. He collapsed, still holding the dead body. By then, I was already burning from lack of energy, so without hesitation I struck the warm, shuddering flesh with my claws and clung to the hot source, soothing my pain. When I regained consciousness, I felt a strange calm and satiation. So I calmly perceived when the thick curtains on the window flung open, and someone black in the dark, a solid silhouette backlit by the hallway light, jumped into the room. I sat between the werewolf bodies, returned to human form, and breathing heavily, from time to time continued to bend down, licking or sucking the remaining blood. Let them say a vampire can't drink all the blood from a person. Turns out they can, if they need to restore their strength, and themselves. "What have you done?" he said quietly. "You shouldn't have started with their blood. It was either them or me," I replied hoarsely without detailed explanation. "He'll understand anyway. You will have to fear both sides." He glanced at something in his hand, shrugged, placed the item on the floor in the room, and left the way he came. I stood from among the bodies and stepped into the room. A medical bag, with blood. So had these not come, things could have indeed been different. Well, all right. Too late to think about what and how would have been. I stood at the window. This world has turned to me in a different way, but I intend to survive in it, despite everything. A knife, with a narrow and thin blade, whistled through the air and crashed into the wooden target leaning against the wall under the windowsill. I dragged the target home in the dead of night, noticing the needed one in the fence around a house set for demolition. Recently, I would have been afraid to even pick it up. Now, I approached and didn't even think it might be too heavy for me. Sitting on the hallway floor, I threw the next knife. The distance is considerable, from the hallway to the farthest corner of my tiny apartment. Stolen knives. Turns out I'm very resourceful. Anyway, what else to do when you have a lot of free time? Now I can't sleep. Well, I can, but I have such strange dreams that even after waking up, I don't always understand whether I saw intricate phantasmagorias emitted by my sleeping brain, or if it was reality, which is becoming more and more fantastical for me. Or I can stay awake and roam around to my heart's content. I had to quit my job. Who would believe that the skinny girl who showed up was the same bulky, hunched woman known to everyone as the most silent dishwasher? I think the cafe didn't worry too much. They waited for a couple of days and quickly found a replacement for me, probably imagining how I would come back and they would, smirking and spreading their arms, say, "Well, you shouldn't have disappeared for so long. There are plenty of people for your place." But I wanted to keep my apartment. A convenient little corner, small and in such a suspicious building that a suspicious lady who loves to walk at night doesn't attract much attention. For the neighbors, I came up with a reassuring story about the transformation of my appearance. Got sick, lay at home for a week without food, lost my job. Some felt sorry for me, and the old hag from the apartment opposite, who still remembered my parents, even brought me boiled macaroni. Turns out, I'm good at stealing. Swift movements, which have become my second nature, didn't allow outsiders to notice what exactly I was doing. The set of knives came from several cafes I visited. They were poorly secured. True, I'm afraid to steal much, especially in open places. Now I know that someone else might still track my quick gesture. Soon I'll owe for the apartment. The landlord will remind me of that with the next mail. Another month, and he will kick me out. I have an idea, to find a job closer to the wealthy quarters. I want to eat too, in all senses. I sighed and stood up. Time, 11th hour. Just the right time to walk and think in the fresh air, especially considering what I usually wear for these walks. Sewn and re-sewn clothes adapted to my current thin figure, looking pretty good in the dark. In general, the saying is true. All cats are gray in the dark. Dressed simply not to attract attention, a jumper, comfortably hanging on me. Over it, a vest made from an old sweater. Old jeans from childhood, cut below the knee, because I could still fit into them, but the length was too short. The outfit was completed by boots bought on sale, never worn because I bought them in the evening and my feet swelled in the mornings. Now they fit just fine. Despite the gnawing feeling in my stomach, I smiled, almost laughed. Whatever happens. 2 stolen knives were tucked into my boots. There are leather pockets sewn by me. The leather from a boot found in a garbage container. That's it. Ready to go. In the tiny hallway, I looked in the mirror and shook my head again. Is this really me? This skinny girl with a pretty nice nose, eyes though not big, but looking normal against the general hungry appearance. My mouth was always small and slightly compressed, but now it looks fitting. Seems even pretty, in the dark, or in dim light. Better, in the shadow. On the way out of the building, I quietly greeted a group of guys, among whom you would not immediately notice 2 girls. Someone answered. Someone snorted. They know me, as they know about my misfortune with illness and work. Don't bother me. However, hey, Jilly, wait. A dark-haired guy caught up with me already at the corner of the building. Tall, broad-shouldered. Due to the warm evening, dressed lightly, a fashionable boxer-like t-shirt and wide pants, the bottoms of which are tucked into high boots. I don't know what they're called. Lots of tattoos on his shoulders and chest. But he's handsome. High-cheeked, with regular features, and his smile is every girl's dream. Although I'm not used to communicating with men, I immediately tensed up. He noticed it right away. Don't be afraid, Jilly, he said condescendingly. I just wanted to warn you that you wander around at night too carelessly. And our neighborhood, you understand. Want me to teach you to fight? All our girls can. Come to the basement at the end of the building tomorrow. We have a club there. Maybe it's too late for me to learn, I said timidly. We know you're not very young, he smiled. But we have some older women too. They just learn self-defense techniques. By the way, you look pretty good now that you've slimmed down. You look like a girl. Watch out, they might start hitting on you. Here, just in case. And he handed me some strange stick. Not very hard, about half a meter long. What is it? A police baton? Return it when you come back. We'll be here for a while. Thanks. Yeah. Shout if you're nearby and need help. We'll come running. He nodded self-satisfactorily like, You're one of us. and we won't let anyone harm you," and walked back, swaying on the move. Body something there, probably. And I sighed and looked at the baton. So what now? Can't hide it or disguise it. What? Carry it openly, like a flower was given to me. And why didn't I take a bag? To put it in the bag I now always carry with me. It would look strange. But nothing else came to mind. So I put the baton in the bag, slightly narrowing it. Looks okay now. And most importantly, in my hands. Somehow it really does feel safer. I headed towards the alley that always amazed me. Stepping out of my grimy neighborhood, I immediately plunged into a world of light and celebration. Beautiful cars and ladies being escorted to restaurants. How these two strange worlds managed to coexist on the border of one alley always surprised and even amused me. Usually, I didn't walk there for long. Just peeked to observe and returned to my world of empty roads and suspicious individuals in about 10 minutes, whose number I increased. Not reaching the alley, I found that the laces on one boot had come undone. Had to lean against the building I was walking along. Fingers tied the knot, and I nearly fell, startled violently. A girl's scream was piercing and cut off so suddenly that even in the first seconds, when thoughts came to order, I realized something was very wrong. So wrong that inside me everything clenched, but not out of fear, as before. Already in a wild run, driven by a whirlwind of thoughts, no, more like instincts, I gulped. I ate everything I wanted and as much as I wanted. But I missed the blood of werewolves, the most delicious, delightful dessert. My mouth even dried up. I didn't notice when I licked my lips. If they're there, if they attacked someone there and don't notice anything, sweet. My mouth filled with saliva. Growling, I wa'ant. Rounding the corner of the building, along which I rushed, I assessed the picture painted by the building opposite in one glance. Since everything happened close to the end, I saw everything in detail. A rich car almost crumpled to the wall by a small car, and in front of it, several people fussed feverishly, mostly dark figures, with a light spot occasionally flickering among them. And all this under the roar coming from the car. The situation was clear to the limit. Someone was locked in their car, and someone was trapped, judging by the breaking cries and pitiful squeaks. Freeing the one in the car made no sense. Without slowing down, I turned towards the group. Not werewolves. As far as I already knew, they don't amuse themselves with human females. Didn't notice how the baton ended up in my hand. But approaching the assaulters, I realized I shouldn't use it. With my current strength, I'd kill with one blow. But I'm not a killer. I threw the bag with the baton while running, grabbed the first one closer to me by the collar, and yanked, tossing him far. Didn't even look where he flew and fell. Clumsily grabbed the back of the second one's jacket, kicked under his knees, and tossed the limp one aside too. The third one, the last one, turned around and got punched in the stomach. It was even easier to throw him away. He screamed in pain and doubling over, and I, not caring about his ribs, kicked him away. The fair-haired girl, about 17 years old, pressed against the wall, turned out to be beautiful as an angel, despite the makeup smeared by tears on her face and swollen, puffed-up mouth and nose. A crying angel. Her dress, which she was futilely trying to press to herself, was clearly slashed with knives. Why? Scaring her? Do they like it when the victim is scared to death? Sadists. The girl looked at me for a second, stammering from crying, and then, apparently sensing protection in me, threw herself at my neck. I hugged her, intending to whisper something soothing, almost crying myself out of pity. A roar behind made me turn and gasp. The small car was pushed away from the car, and it tumbled onto the road with a clang. A tall guy in a light coat flew out of the car and, oh my God, with 2 pistols. I turned sideways, instinctively protecting the girl hanging on me, crying. The guy was walking towards us. Another angel. A vengeance. Apparently breaking out of the trapped car. He didn't see what was happening and thinks I'm one of them. A sob in my ear. Hands slid from my neck, locked around my waist. A trembling whisper in my ear. Oh, he's going to kill us. Kill us. Isn't he coming to protect her? Puzzled, I quickly surveyed the street, figuring out where to run, grabbing the problematic girl. Into the alley. It's closer. I didn't expect the shot. Casually extending his arm with a gun, the guy froze on the road, the one I had punched in the stomach. The left hand rose. The second one froze on the ground. The right hand rose again. The left joined it. Don't. I shouted, almost screamed when I realized he was absolutely sure to kill the third one. Yes, they are rapists and bastards, but you can't do that, you can't. Too bad the baton was lying too far. I would have gladly thrown it at this creepy guy. At the hands, which too easily managed the weapons. Break them. Despite the frightened angel, someone fierce started rising inside me, ready, if necessary, to pounce on the jerk who thought of himself as God knows what. The guy stopped, looked in our direction. Carefully, slowly lowered his hands and walked towards us, as if completely forgetting about the crawling one on the road, though he was walking towards us as if he wanted to shoot everyone who made him nervous. Long, shoulder-length blonde hair fluttered in the night wind, and for this beauty alone, I hated him with all my heart. Although it was the hair that became the clue that he wouldn't do anything bad to the rescued girl. Surely her brother. He'll give her a scolding, that's all. Probably. That's what the blonde girl meant when she was afraid. Oh, he's going to kill us. As I recently did, the guy pulled the girl from behind me by the scruff. She obediently unclasped her hands from my waist and hung in his hand like a misbehaving kitten. Big eyes blinked with long lashes, and the charming little mouth twisted, ready to sob at any moment. "Can you stand on your feet?" the guy asked calmly, and put her on the ground. On the asphalt, that is. The girl waited for him to put away his pistols and take out his mobile, and with tiny steps approached me again. Thin fingers squeezed my hand. He stared at our hands unblinkingly while monotonously ordering the phone to call a tow truck and come for him and his sister, I guessed right, at a local bar. "Is there any bar with a restroom nearby?" he asked me irritably, without taking the phone from his ear. "Yes." The lame onager. "Heard that? Bring the car there." "I'm not going anywhere looking like this," the girl complained, spreading her arms so he could see her in all her pitiful condition. The guy looked her over. "It'll do. I'll get your purse and shawl from the car. It's long and wide enough to cover the consequences of your whims." But He simply didn't listen, turned to the car and walked away. Oh, his hair is long to his shoulders only on the sides, but down his back flows a luxurious tail. So trendy. I wonder how many shampoos he uses to maintain this perfection. I instinctively touched my dark twisted in a knot hair. Could wear it loose. It's not long, but it's greasy from the dirt. I wash it only with hot water. On the way he bent down, grabbed the scruff of the third guy, the one not shot, and dragged him to the car, throwing him at the wheels. Even from here, from us, you could hear him clearly say, "Guard until the tow truck arrives. If you fail, you'll join your buddies." Got it? With things in hand, he approached us, detouring slightly to pick up my bag with the baton. I got worried. What if he takes it away and I have to return it? The thing was given to me temporarily. What is this? It's mine. So you drove them off with this? Yeah. Will you return it to me? Did you take self-defense courses? No. Just know a few moves, I lied easily, just to get the baton back. All right. You're coming with us to the bar to help Annette clean up. Hungry? I felt nauseous from his question. If the lad is from the rich and generous. Yes, I replied defiantly. Then let's go, and we'll talk there. And we went. Me and Annette like guilty ahead, he guarded from behind. I almost burst into nervous laughter. The shepherd leads his flock. Obedient sheep. In the bar, the sheep went to clean their feathers in the ladies' room. Over my shoulder, the guy asked what to order for me. Steak, rare, I answered calmly and only turned away from him, swallowing. Am I really going to eat real meat today? We spent a ton of napkins because Annette was afraid to wash off the traces of blood and tears with local water. Seeing the blood, I carefully asked, Annette, are you okay? I mean the blood. I'm fine, the girl sighed. Only one had very sharp nails. He, when tearing my dress, kept. In the mirror, I saw her eyes fill with tears. I understand. Don't cry. Now you're with your brother, am I right? Yes. Chris is my brother. And what's your name? Jilly. Jilly, do you live here? The conversation went on almost about nothing, just to talk, and then Annette started telling how scared she was. I listened silently, understanding she needed to speak out, to put into words the recent fear, and forget about it. So I learned she really did act up. Leaving the restaurant, she insisted that she knew a wonderful bar behind one of the houses on this street, where her brother had never been. Chris said it was too late to walk further, but she didn't listen, and ran behind the house that seemed familiar to her. He drove after her. And here, behind the house, they got caught in a trap. Listening to the story, I felt something strange in it. But what? Probably the strange efforts of the guys from the neighborhood to rape a girl from society. They trapped her brother in a cage so he couldn't interfere with their plan. They threatened and scared the girl. And the brother behaved quite strangely. No, of course, I understand that all deaths can easily be attributed to self-defense, especially if the defending party is a rich person. No. There was definitely something I didn't understand in this situation. While we were away, Chris ordered a table in a separate corner. He wasn't too lazy to get up and show where each of us should sit, though I could figure out where exactly to sit without him. A flat plate with steaming meat, beautifully framed by the blood flowing from it, stood only in front of my chair. I'm afraid my hands trembled a bit as I cut this piece, clinking the knife and fork a bit louder than necessary. I was most afraid I couldn't collect the blood from the plate. Therefore, having the piece, I began to dip each next cut into the sweet gravy. So the last one I swallowed almost dry, with enormous gratitude to the chance that for the first time in a month fed me to my fill, and finally looked up. Annette watched me, her mouth open, with pity. Her brother, with some concentrated attention. Yes, I imagine what a sight I must have been, hastily devouring this piece. I wonder how I should address this Chris now, by name or calling him Sir. And I'm also curious if he will order another portion of meat, seeing my gluttony. He did. This time I tried to eat the piece to enjoy it fully. And Chris, thoughtfully watching the rapidly shrinking meat, offered me a job, as a companion for his sister, an unofficial bodyguard, like introducing me to everyone as a distant relative. Annette immediately rejoiced, and I said I would think about it. He wrote down my address, lamented that I didn't have a mobile. 2 hours later, I sat at home, lazily throwing knives at the target, full and content. So without hesitation, I opened the door when someone rang. Chris. Unbelievable. So, this is where you live. I brought you a mobile phone. A work one, he clarified at my raised eyebrows. But I still don't know. I didn't notice his quick movement. His hand lay on my neck. He leaned towards me and pressed his lips to mine. The upper one couldn't withstand the pressure and split. The pain drowned in bliss. I couldn't imagine kissing could be so... And he ruined it. Lifted his head and, looking down at me, bent again, to lick the drop of blood from my lip. Savored. That's what it is. And I thought, how did she, with just one stick? How come the coven doesn't know about you yet? Anyway, I don't care. Starting tomorrow, you're on duty as a companion. He nodded arrogantly and left, leaving me honestly in turmoil.